Now to a slower pace and what is becoming of our great rivers. Across the world, hundreds of people are working to protect and restore the great waterways of our cities. Kathy Jacobs met one of them, the man known as the Yarra Riverkeeper.
Oh, Yarra River took my baby from me.
It's an honour and a privilege to be the riverkeeper. There is a real connection you feel after a while to the river and to the city, because the river is such an important part of the city.
Hey, to Yarra River, for what you've done to me.
Melbourne has again been voted the world's most livable city, and Andrew Kelly wants to keep it that way. He's a passionate voice for the famously brown Yarra, which cuts through the Victorian capital, and he's set himself a big challenge.
I would like to see the river run clear again. If we're not ambitious, we'll never get anywhere.
Even if you just turn around, Andrew, it's ahead of us as well.
Once a month, Andrew Kelly, the Yarra River keeper, meets up with Neil Blake, the keeper of Port Phillip Bay.
And is this sustainability?
It is.
Using pure Yarra water?
Well, it's 70% Yarra water because 70% of our water comes from the Yarra.
They're part of the International Waterkeeper Alliance, founded 50 years ago by a group of fishermen and scientists in New York.
Our waterways are the arteries of the earth. If we don't look after them, we're not looking after ourselves.
Today's excursion is a regular survey for microplastics in the lower reaches.
Microplastics can be eaten, swallowed by a fish and other wildlife. They are getting into our food chain. It's something we need to draw attention to.
Many of the tiny particles captured in Neil's net started out as somebody's discarded litter.
Food and beverage containers are very common plastic items that do get fractured when they just get dropped on the street and maybe driven over by a car, break up into smaller particles. So they're the sort of things that we end up with in the net.
If we have fewer hard surfaces, we will improve the health of our waterways and our bays, because you won't have that sudden rush after a rainstorm that will carry all the pollutants and all the rubbish that we've dropped into the stormwater system and ultimately into the river.
On the way back, talk of hard surfaces leads to another issue.
The development I see along that stretch just appalls me, and we need to back it off, let the sun get to the edge of the river, and then we'll bay culture with people.
Of the CBD's riverside.
I'd love to see, say, an urban forest down at the point at Collins Walk, just next to the Balti Bridge. We could actually replant that and create wetlands there, a salt marsh perhaps. We can create a habitat highway along there.
Some developers must shudder when they see your little boat coming down the river.
That's an interesting thought. I just want a better river.
You wouldn't swim in it after heavy rain, but Andrew says the Yarra is cleaner than most people think. He recently had an unlikely encounter just a few kilometres from the CBD.
About 11 o'clock, grey, rainy, misty, still day, and I saw something moving in the water, and I soon realised it was a platypus, and it was just swimming around here. I watched it for maybe 5 minutes. You also see long-necked turtles and eastern water dragons along here. I mean, it would be fantastic to see seals and dolphins come up. Certainly the seals come up, I reckon, probably once, maybe twice a year. So I think it's really worth kind of looking at it from the perspective of what's possible. What are the opportunities that we have?
Another who imagines the opportunities is Matt Stewart, who wants to revive a once famous event.
Here's a big bench taking the water on their long journey, 3 miles down the river.
It started, I think, in 1913 when it was called the 3 Mile Yarra Swim. And in the 30s, actually, it was one of the biggest open water swimming races in the world, where up to 100,000 people actually lined the banks of the river.
I'm mighty pleased to have won this race.
Have you found the Yarra?
I'm pretty dirty.
Matt, it's hard to believe we're just 6 kilometres from the heart of Melbourne.
I know, Kathy. I think I'm standing here on an old diving board situated at the Alphington Pools, where in the 1920s there would have been a hive of activity, people swimming and bathing and picnicking right behind us.
Nearly a century later, the Yarra Swim Co is also proposing a floating pool in the heart of the CBD. It's working with international firms on the costing and design.
You'll talk to many people from overseas, and if they know Melbourne, they'll probably mention the dirty Yarra. So I'm quite excited by the idea of turning that around and the pride that people could have in cleaning up the river as we move forward.
Victoria's government is now considering more than 100 submissions about the future management of the Yarra, which is currently under the influence of multiple authorities. Over the decades, political promises have ebbed and flowed, but now there's a determination to create a single trust to govern all 240 kilometres of the river, from the mountains to the port. And that's music to the ears of the Yarra Riverkeeper.
I mean, we face huge challenges, I think, with population growth, and we need to be smart about how we solve those challenges, and we can't just let people dominate. The problems of Melbourne are the problems of every urban river.
Kathy Jacobs reporting.